Question 16. When constructing an XML DTD, how do you create an external entity reference in an attribute value? Answer. Every interview session should have at least one trick question. Although possible when using SGML, XML DTDs don't support defining external entity references in attribute values. It's more important for the candidate to respond to this question in a logical way than the candidate know the somewhat obscure answer. Question 17. How would you build a search engine for large volumes of XML data? Answer. The way candidates answer this question may provide insight into their view of XML data. For those who view XML primarily as a way to denote structure for text files, a common answer is to build a full text search and handle the data similarly to the way internet portals handle HTML pages. Others consider XML as a standard way of transferring structured data between disparate systems. These candidates often describe some scheme of importing XML into a relational or object database and relying on the database's engine for searching. Lastly, candidates that have worked with vendors specializing in this area often say that the best way to handle this situation is to use a third-party software package optimized for XML data. Question 18. Does XML replace HTML? Answer. No. XML itself does not replace HTML. Instead, it provides an alternative which allows you to define your own set of markup elements. HTML is expected to remain in common use for some time to come, and the current version of HTML is in XML syntax. XML is designed to make the writing of DTDs much simpler than with full SGML. Question 19. Do I have to know HTML or SGML before I learn XML? Answer. No. Although it's useful because a lot of XML terminology and practice derives from 2 decades experience of SGML. Be aware that knowing HTML is not the same as understanding SGML. Although HTML was written as an SGML application, browsers ignore most of it, which is why so many useful things don't work. So just because something is done a certain way in HTML browsers does not mean it's correct, least of all in XML. Question 20. Is there an XML version of HTML? Answer. Yes, the W3C recommends using XHTML, which is a reformulation of HTML4 in XML 1.0. This specification defines HTML as an XML application and provides 3 DTDs corresponding to the ones defined by HTML4: strict, transitional, and frame set. The semantics of the elements and their attributes are as defined in the W3C recommendation for HTML4. These semantics provide the foundation for future extensibility of XHTML. Compatibility with existing HTML browsers is possible by following a small set of guidelines. Question 21. If XML is just a subset of SGML, can I use XML files directly with existing SGML tools? Answer. Yes, provided you use up-to-date SGML software which knows about the web SGML adaptations DC to ISO 8879. The features needed to support XML, such as the variant form for empty elements, some aspects of the SGML declaration such as name, case, general, no, multiple attribute, token list declarations, etc. An alternative is to use an SGML DTD to let you create a fully normalized SGML file, but one which does not use empty elements, and then remove the doctype declaration so it becomes a well-formed DTD-less XML file. Most SGML tools now handle XML files well, and provide an option switch between the 2 standards. Question 22. How do I configure an pointer processor? Answer. There is no required configuration for this pointer framework. The Upager command line utility provides some configuration options. Applications configure individual pointer processors when they obtain an instance from an appropriate pointer processor factory method. Question 23. Who can create an XML namespace? Answer: anybody can create an XML namespace. All you need to do is assign a URI as its name and decide what element type and attribute names are in it. The URI must be under your control and should not be being used to identify a different XML namespace, such as by a coworker. Question 24. Do XML namespaces apply to entity names, notation names, or processing instruction targets? Answer: no. XML namespaces apply only to element type and attribute names. Furthermore, in an XML document it conforms to the XML namespace's recommendation. Entity names, notation names, and processing instruction targets must not contain colons. Question 25. How do I control formatting and appearance? Answer: in HTML, default styling was built into the browsers because the tagset of HTML was predefined and hardwired into browsers. In XML, where you can define your own tagset, browsers cannot possibly be expected to guess or know in advance what names you are going to use and what they will mean. So you need a style sheet if you want to display formatted text. Browsers which read XML will accept and use a CSS style sheet at a minimum, but you can also use the more powerful XSLT style sheet language to transform your XML into HTML, which browsers, of course, already know how to display, and that HTML can still use a CSS style sheet. This way you get all the document management benefits of using XML, but you don't have to worry about your readers needing XML smarts in their browsers. Question 26. How do I execute or run an XML file? Answer: XML itself is not a programming language, so XML files don't run or execute. XML is a markup specification language and XML files are just data. They sit there until you run a program which displays them, like a browser, or does some work with them, like a converter which writes the data in another format, or a database which reads the data or modifies them, like an editor. If you want to view or display an XML file, open it with an XML editor or in question B.3 XML browser. The water is muddied by XSL, both XSLT and XSLFO, which use XML syntax to implement a declarative programming language. In these cases, it is arguable that you can execute XML code by running a processing application like Saxon, which compiles the directives specified in XSLT files into Java bytecode to process XML. Question 27. Can I use JavaScript, ActiveX, etc. in XML files? Answer: this will depend on what facilities your users' browsers implement. XML is about describing information. Scripting languages and languages for embedded functionality are software which enables the information to be manipulated at the user's end. So these languages do not normally have any place in an XML file itself, but in style sheets like XSL and CSS, where they can be added to generate a HTML. XML itself provides a way to define the markup needed to implement scripting languages. As a neutral standard, it neither encourages nor discourages their use, and does not favor one language over another, so it is possible to use XML markup to store the program code from where it can be retrieved by, for example, XSLT and array expressed in a HTML script element. Server-side script embedding, like PHP or ASP, can be used with the relevant server to modify the XML code on the fly as the document is served, just as they can with HTML. Authors should be aware, however, that embedding server-side scripting may mean the file as stored is not valid XML. It only becomes valid when processed and served, so care must be taken when using validating editors or other software to handle or manage such files. A better solution may be to use an XML serving solution like Cocoon, AxeKit, or Propelx. Question 28. Can I encode mathematics using XML? Answer: yes, if the document type you use provides for math and your users' browsers are capable of rendering it. The mathematics using community has developed a MathML recommendation at the W3C, which is a native XML application suitable for embedding in other DTDs and schemas. It is also possible to make XML fragments from other DTDs, such as ISO 12083 Math or OpenMath, or one of your own making. Browsers which display math embedded in SGML existed for many years, e.g. Dynatext, Panorama, Multidoc Pro, and mainstream browsers are now rendering MathML. David Carlisle has produced a set of style sheets for rendering MathML in browsers. It is also possible to use XSLT to convert XML math markup to LaTeX for print PDF rendering, or to use XSL4. Please note that XML is not itself a programming language, so concepts such as arithmetic and if statements, if-then-else logic, are not meaningful in XML documents. Question 29. How do I get XML into or out of a database? Answer: ask your database manufacturer. They all provide XML import and export modules to connect XML applications with databases. In some trivial cases, there will be a one-to-one match between field names in the database table and element type names in the XML schema or DTD. But in most cases, some programming will be required to establish the desired match. This can usually be stored as a procedure so that subsequent uses are simply commands or calls with the relevant parameters. In less trivial but still simple cases, you could export by writing a report routine that formats the output as an XML document, and you could import by writing an XSLT transformation that formatted the XML data as a load file. Question 30. What's Xlink? Answer: this specification defines the XML linking language, Xlink, which allows elements to be inserted into XML documents in order to create and describe links between resources. It uses XML syntax to create structures that can describe links similar to the simple unidirectional hyperlinks of today's HTML, as well as more sophisticated links.